The apples were Caleb's idea. He had pointed to the bag with both hands, decisive in the way only 5-year-olds could be, and said, "The soft ones, Mom, because my baby teeth aren't strong yet." Sarah had laughed, not the laugh she kept for coworkers or her building supervisor, the polite, careful kind, but the real one, the one that started in her chest and came out before she could think about it. She put the soft apples in the cart. That was the only easy moment of the morning. The rest of it was math. It was always math. $2.14 left on the transit card, $43 in the checking account, which had to last until Thursday. The heating bill that had come in $11 higher than last month. Sarah walked the aisles of Breyer and Finch the way she walked every errand, with a number running quietly in the back of her head, adjusting, trimming, putting things back. Breyer and Finch was not her usual store. Her usual store was the discount supermarket on Clement Street, where the fluorescent lights flickered and the checkout lines were long and nobody looked at anyone else. But the discount store had been out of Caleb's fever reducer for 2 weeks, and last night his temperature had climbed to 101 and she hadn't slept, and this morning the only place within walking distance that stocked the right brand was here, with its polished floors and its handwritten chalkboard signs and its customers who wore coats that cost more than Sarah made in a month. She didn't belong here. She knew that. She didn't need anyone to tell her. She wore her uniform because she hadn't had time to change the gray and navy work shirt with the small logo of Apex Building Services stitched above the breast pocket, the kind of shirt that told people exactly what she was before she opened her mouth. She had thought about it in the elevator that morning, thought about going back upstairs to change, and then Caleb had coughed and she had picked up the cart instead. It was fine. She would pay and leave. She would be invisible. She was good at invisible. The checkout line had 4 people ahead of her when she joined it. Sarah held Caleb's hand and watched the numbers on the register the way she always did, not because she didn't trust the machine, but because the habit was older than Caleb, older than this job, older than the version of herself that knew how to be careful with money. Milk, bread, fever reducer, apples. She had the voucher in her coat pocket, the state assistance voucher, the one that came in the mail every month in a plain white envelope. She had never been ashamed of it. She had told herself that, many times, in the bathroom mirror. She worked 46 hours a week. She paid her taxes. The voucher was not charity. It was a system doing what systems were supposed to do. She believed that most days. She was third in line when the woman arrived. Sarah heard her before she saw her, the click of heels that had a different quality than regular heels, a confidence in the sound, an expectation that the floor existed to receive them. The woman who stepped into line behind Caleb was perhaps 45, dressed in a camel-colored coat with a fur collar, her hair the kind of blonde that came from salons rather than genetics. She carried a small basket with 2 items in it and looked at the line ahead of her the way people looked at traffic, as an inconvenience caused by others. Sarah looked back at the register, 1 person ahead of her. Now, she reached into her pocket for the voucher. She didn't hear the laugh at first. She registered it as background noise, the way you register a car horn from the next street. Then Caleb squeezed her hand, a specific squeeze, the one that meant something is happening, and she looked up. The woman in the camel coat was looking directly at her. She had said something to the man beside her, a broad man in a sport coat who was now also looking at Sarah, and she was laughing, and it was not a quiet laugh. It was the kind of laugh that expected an audience. The woman's eyes dropped to the voucher in Sarah's hand, then to the Apex logo on Sarah's shirt, then back up to Sarah's face with an expression that was almost curious, the way you might look at something unexpected in a museum display case. "Unbelievable," the woman said, to no one in particular. "They'll let anyone in here." The person ahead of Sarah finished paying and moved away. The young cashier, a girl who couldn't have been older than 20, with an expression that said she had already had a long morning, looked at Sarah and then looked past her at the woman in the camel coat and then looked at the register, uncertain. Sarah stepped forward and placed her items on the belt, one by one. Milk, bread, fever reducer, apples. "Excuse me," the woman said, louder now, addressing the cashier directly. "I only have 2 things. I don't see why I should have to wait behind." She paused, glancing at Sarah's voucher. "This." The cashier's hand hovered over the register. Sarah watched the girl's face go through its calculations, the same kind of calculations Sarah ran every morning, but different variables, different weights. The woman in the camel coat was the kind of customer who knew the manager's name and used it. The woman in the work uniform was the kind of customer who used a voucher. The cashier began to reach toward the lane closed sign. Sarah placed her hand flat on the conveyor belt. Not hard, not dramatic, just present. "I was in line first," she said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "I'll pay like everyone else." The cashier's hand retreated from the sign. She didn't look at Sarah when she began scanning the items. She looked at the register, at the belt, at the small screen that showed the running total anywhere that wasn't the woman in the camel coat, who had gone very still in the way that certain kinds of people went still when they didn't get what they wanted immediately. Not quiet, not accepting. Still, the way pressure was still before it found a release. Milk, $3.49. Bread, $2.78. Fever reducer, $8.99. Sarah watched the numbers. She kept her hand loose at her side. She could feel Caleb pressed against her left leg, not hiding exactly, but close, the way he got when something in a room felt wrong but he didn't have words for it yet. "This is what's wrong with this city," the woman said, to the man beside her, at a volume designed to carry. "You can't go anywhere anymore without—" "Victoria." The man touched her arm. A warning, or an attempt at one. She ignored him. "I'm serious. There are places for this. Discount stores, food banks." She said the words cleanly, without cruelty in her tone, which was, Sarah had learned, the most particular kind of cruelty. The kind that sounded like reason. "This store has a certain clientele. It's not snobbery. It's just some people don't understand that. Apples, $3.15. Total, $18.41. Sarah put the voucher on the counter. The cashier took it without looking up, processed it with the quick, practiced motion of someone who had done it before and knew better than to make it into anything. The remaining balance came up, 0. Sarah exhaled. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." The sound of the woman's voice sharpened. Sarah was reaching for the bags when she heard it a different quality now, no longer performing for the man beside her but addressing the room. She turned. Victoria Hargrove had her phone out. She was holding it at chest height, camera facing forward, pointed at Sarah. "I want people to see this," she said. "To no one, to everyone. You know what this woman makes an hour? And she's shopping here, in a place like this." "Mom." Caleb's voice was very small. Sarah looked down. He was looking up at her with his serious face, the one he wore when he was working something out, when a question had been bothering him for a while, and he had finally decided to ask it. He tugged the hem of her jacket. "Did I do something wrong?" he said. "Because I wanted the apples?" The thing that had been holding steady in Sarah's chest shifted. She crouched down to his level, right there in the middle of the checkout lane with Victoria's phone still pointed at them and the line backed up behind and the cashier staring at a point somewhere above the register. She put both hands on Caleb's face. "No," she said. "You didn't do anything wrong. You wanted apples. That's allowed." He nodded, slowly, processing. "Okay," he said. He believed her. That was the thing about Caleb. He still believed her, completely. The way children believed their mothers before the world started teaching them not to. She didn't know how many years of that she had left. She wanted to protect every single one of them. She stood up. "I'm going to send this to Apex Building Services," Victoria said. She had not lowered the phone. "I know people who know that board. The idea that someone representing their company, even a cleaning person, would be out here doing this. She's not on the clock," the cashier said. It came out quieter than she probably intended, and she immediately looked back at the register. "Excuse me?" Victoria turned the phone slightly toward her. The cashier said nothing else. The manager arrived the way managers arrived, quickly, from a side door, with the air of someone who had been watching on a monitor and had timed his entrance carefully. He was perhaps 35, trim, in a button-down, with the store's logo on the chest. He looked at the scene and took exactly 3 seconds to assess it. Sarah watched his face in those 3 seconds. She had learned to read that particular calculation. She saw it on the faces of building supervisors, of landlords, of anyone who held a small piece of power and had to decide what to do with it in front of an audience. For 1 second, she thought he might surprise her. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved from Victoria to Sarah and back. And in that movement, she saw something that might have been decency losing a fight it had already decided not to win. He turned to Victoria. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said, "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. Let me open a priority lane for you." Victoria lowered the phone, just slightly, the ghost of a smile. "That's more like it," she said. Sarah picked up her bags. She took Caleb's hand. She turned toward the exit because there was nothing left to do here, nothing that wouldn't make it worse, and she was tired in the kind of way that had nothing to do with sleep, and Caleb had his apples and his fever reducer, and she just needed to get outside. She was 3 steps from the door when Victoria's voice came again, clearly, deliberate as a thrown stone. "Sweetheart," addressed to Caleb, "you should learn early. Your mom doesn't belong in places like this." Sarah pushed through the front door. The cold hit her face. October in the city, gray sky, the smell of rain on concrete. She stood on the top step with Caleb in her arms. She had picked him up without deciding to, the way you reached for something when you needed to hold on to it, and she looked at the street. Caleb had gone very quiet. His face was pressed against her shoulder. He wasn't crying. That was the thing she kept coming back to. Standing there on the step, he wasn't crying. He had understood something, and he was being quiet with it, the way children were quiet with things that were too heavy for them. Sarah stared at the sidewalk below the steps. She thought about the transit card, the checking account, the heating bill. She thought about Thursday and about the rent check she had post-dated and was hoping, very specifically, would not be cashed before then. She thought about what it would cost her to go back inside. She thought about Caleb's face when he asked if he had done something wrong because he wanted apples. She thought, if I walk down these steps, he will remember this. He will remember that this is what you do. You leave. You take what's given to you, and you leave. She stood there for a long moment, long enough for the cold to settle into her collar, and for a woman with a stroller to pass her on the steps without looking up. Then, she set Caleb down, took a slow breath, and walked back inside. The door swung shut behind her. The store was exactly as she had left it 30 seconds ago. The lights, the polished floors, the soft music piped through speakers so that buying groceries felt like something other than buying groceries. Victoria was at the priority lane now, her 2 items already on the belt. The manager stood nearby with his hands clasped, attentive. Sarah set Caleb down beside her. She crouched in front of him. "I need you to wait right here," she said. "Right on this spot. Can you do that?" Caleb looked at the floor, then at her. The black tile? The black tile. He stepped onto it carefully, both feet together, and stood up straight. He was wearing his good sneakers, the ones with the Velcro straps, and he looked very small and very serious standing there on his chosen square of floor. "I'll be right back," Sarah said. She walked to the checkout lane, picked up her bags from where she'd left them, moved back to the counter, and set them down again in front of the register. The cashier looked up. Sarah met her eyes. "Can you give me a receipt?" Sarah said. "A printed one, with the voucher number on it." "Ah, yes." The girl reached for the register. "I can do that. Mrs. Hargrove." The voice came from the direction of the pharmacy counter, measured, unhurried, with the quality of someone accustomed to being listened to without raising it. The man who stepped forward was perhaps 60, in a dark jacket and unremarkable clothes, carrying a small paper bag from the pharmacy. He was not tall. He was not visibly important. He was the kind of man you would not look at twice in a grocery store, which, Sarah would later understand, was something he had cultivated deliberately. He came here most Tuesday mornings, picked up his nephew's prescription, and was back in his car within 20 minutes. Nobody recognized him. He preferred it that way. Victoria turned from the priority lane. Her expression shifted through several things quickly before settling on careful recognition. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Robert Callahan," he said. "We've met once. At the Harbor District zoning hearing, 4 years ago. You were there with your husband." "A beat. I remember," she said, in a tone that suggested she was still determining what to do with the information. "I've been standing over there since this started," Robert said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture at Sarah, or at Victoria's phone, or at the manager, who had gone very still. "I saw what happened." Then you saw a woman using public assistance in a store that. I saw you film a private citizen without her consent and threaten her employment. He said it, the way you stated a fact about weather. I also heard what you said to her child. The store had gone quiet in the specific way. Stores went quiet when something real was happening, the music and ambient noise receding, people stopping their pretense of looking at other things. Victoria's chin lifted. I don't know what you think gives you the right. I own the building she cleans, Robert said. He didn't say it loudly. He didn't need to. Victoria's mouth closed. The manager took a small, involuntary step backward. Robert turned to Sarah. He had a steady way of looking at people that suggested he was genuinely interested in what they were going to say next. My name is Robert Callahan, he said to her directly. I founded Callahan Property Group. Apex Building Services holds contracts with several of my buildings, including the one you're assigned to. He paused. I want to be honest with you, because I think you've had enough of people not being honest with you today. Sarah waited. What this woman did is actionable. The recording, the threat to your employer, the remarks to your son. You have grounds for a formal complaint to the city's Labor Relations Board. He paused. But I want you to understand what that means. It means going on record. It means your name attached to a complaint against an Apex client. There's a real chance they suspend you during the review. 2, maybe 3 weeks without pay. He said it plainly, not apologetically. I don't know your exact situation, but I know enough about these contracts to know that's not a small thing. Sarah said nothing. The manager here, Robert continued, without looking at the manager, has already quietly offered you a store credit as a gesture of goodwill. He said the phrase with the same neutral tone he might use to describe something left out in the rain. That credit won't appear on any record. It won't change anything for the next person this happens to. Sarah looked at Caleb on his black tile. He was watching her with his whole face, his eyes tracking her the way they did when she was trying to explain something that mattered still and open, missing nothing. She looked at the receipt in her hand. She looked at Victoria Hargrove, who was still holding her phone at her side, and whose expression had moved through anger and arrived somewhere less certain, the first small crack in the composure of someone who had never needed to wonder how a room would go. What does the complaint actually do? Sarah said. If I file it, it opens a labor audit of Apex's practices in this district. There are people on your shift rotation who've had overnight differential pay miscalculated for months. There are medical support applications submitted through Apex's HR system that were never forwarded to the city. He met her eyes. I don't know if yours is one of them, but I intend to find out. The heating bill. The form she had filled out in September and been told was under review. I file the complaint, Sarah said slowly, and I might not make rent next month. That's a real possibility. And if I don't file, those people keep getting underpaid. Also a real possibility. Sarah was quiet for a moment. The store hummed around her. Somewhere in the back, a cart rattled down an aisle. You don't have to decide right now, Robert said. I can give you my direct number. You can think about it. Call me tomorrow. Do you have a pen? Sarah said. He looked at her for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket. She signed with the receipt folded underneath as a hard surface, standing at the end of the checkout belt, in her Apex uniform, in Briar and Finch, on a Tuesday morning in October. Robert would make the necessary calls afterward. His assistant, the labor board contact, the Apex account manager, who was about to have a very different kind of Tuesday than he'd planned. Victoria watched her sign it. She said nothing. That was the thing Sarah noticed, not the pen, not Robert, but the silence from Victoria Hargrove. For the first time since she had entered the line, Victoria had nothing to say. She had operated, Sarah understood now, entirely on the assumption that nothing she did here would follow her, that a woman in a work uniform, with a voucher and a 5-year-old, would absorb what was given to her and disappear. She had been wrong. Sarah walked back to the black tile. Caleb took her hand without being asked. They walked to the door together, bags in Sarah's free hand, receipt in her coat pocket. She pushed the door open. The cold was the same as before. The gray sky, the rain smell, the city going about itself. Caleb looked up at her as they came down the steps, not with the weighted silence he'd had on her shoulder outside, the quiet that had told her he'd understood something he shouldn't have needed to understand yet. He looked at her the way he looked at her when she fixed things, when the heat came back on, when the answer turned out to exist. "Did you do something?" he said. "I signed my name," she said. He considered this. "Is that good?" Sarah shifted the bags, looked down at him, and said, "Yeah, Bug, that's good." They walked down the steps together. She didn't know about next month, or the audit, or how the math would work on Thursday. She didn't know how many people on her shift rotation would want to be part of something like this. She knew that Caleb was holding her hand. She knew that her spine was straight. That was the whole of it, and it was enough.